The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the dusty town square of South Pass City, Wyoming, and Clara Reynolds felt her stomach drop as she realized she was next on the platform. The year was 1874, and the summer heat pressed down like a heavy blanket on everyone gathered in the makeshift auction area where desperate families sold whatever they could to survive the harsh economic times that had gripped the territory. Clara's stepfather had brought her here after her mother died 3 months earlier, claiming he could no longer afford to feed another mouth, especially one as large as hers. At 22 years old, Clara had always been a bigger girl, with curves that society deemed excessive and an appetite that her stepfather viewed as wasteful. Her mother had protected her, loved her, told her that her size did not determine her worth. But now her mother was gone and Clara stood alone in a faded calico dress that had seen better days, waiting to be sold like cattle to whoever would pay. The auctioneer, a thin man with a weasel-like face, looked her over with barely concealed disdain before calling out to the sparse crowd. "Next up we have a healthy young woman, good for work around a homestead or farm, strong back, able body. What am I bid?" His voice carried across the square, but the enthusiasm that had been present for the prettier, slimmer girls earlier in the day was notably absent now. Clara kept her eyes down, her cheeks burning with humiliation as she heard the whispers and snickers from the crowd. Her stepfather stood off to the side, arms crossed, looking impatient to be done with this business and collect whatever meager sum she might bring. The bidding started low, insultingly low, and Clara felt tears prick at her eyes though she refused to let them fall. A rancher bid $5, then a shopkeeper raised it to $7, but both men looked at her with cold calculation rather than any hint of compassion. She was being sold as labor, nothing more, and everyone present knew it. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled down her back as the minutes stretched on. Then, just as the auctioneer was about to declare the sale final at $10 to a grizzled farmer who looked like he would work her to death within a year, a new voice rang out from the back of the crowd. $50. The voice was deep and firm, cutting through the murmurs like a knife through butter. Every head turned to see who had spoken, and Clara dared to lift her gaze. A tall man in his late 20s pushed through the crowd, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each confident step. He wore typical cowboy attire, leather chaps over worn denim pants, a dusty shirt that had once been white, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the unforgiving sun. But what struck Clara most was not his clothing but the way he carried himself, with a quiet dignity and purpose that made others step aside without question. The auctioneer's eyes widened at the substantial bid. $50. Well now, that is a bid indeed. Do I hear 55? He looked around hopefully, but the other bidders had already lost interest, shaking their heads and turning away. The cowboy who had bid walked closer to the platform, and as he approached, Clara got a better look at him. His face was weathered from years under the sun but handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and eyes that were a startling shade of blue. When those eyes met hers, Clara felt something shift inside her chest, though she could not name what it was. Unlike the others who had looked at her with contempt or cold assessment, this man looked at her with something that might have been recognition, as if he saw past her physical form to something deeper. Going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman for $50. The gavel came down again and Clara's fate was sealed. Her stepfather practically ran to collect the money, not even sparing her a goodbye as he counted the bills and disappeared into the crowd. The cowboy stepped up to the platform and offered Clara his hand to help her down. His hand was calloused and strong, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living, but his grip was gentle as he steadied her descent. "My name is William Everett," he said once they were both standing on solid ground. His voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. I need help around the place, but I want you to know right now that I will not mistreat you. You will have your own room, proper food, and fair treatment." "Is that understood?" Clara nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. She had expected cruelty or at best indifference, but this man spoke to her with a respect she had not experienced since her mother's death. William gestured toward a sturdy horse tied nearby. "Can you ride?" "Not well," Clara admitted, finding her voice at last. It came out rougher than she intended, scraped raw by unshed tears and the dust that seemed to coat everything in this territory. William nodded as if he had expected as much. "We will go slow then. I have a wagon, but I left it at the livery getting a wheel repaired. The horse can carry us both." He led her to the animal, a patient-looking bay mare, and mounted first before reaching down to pull Clara up behind him. She hesitated, acutely aware of her weight and worried the horse could not manage, but William's expression remained patient and encouraging. With his help, she managed to get situated, sitting sideways behind the saddle and gripping his waist to keep from falling. The horse shifted slightly under the added weight, but showed no signs of distress, and William guided the mare into an easy walk that would not jostle them too much on the journey ahead. They rode in silence for the first mile, leaving South Pass City behind as they headed into the open country. The landscape was beautiful in its starkness, rolling hills covered in sagebrush and hardy grasses that somehow survived the brutal summers and frigid winters. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding snow even in July. Clara had lived in Wyoming her whole life, but had rarely ventured far from town. The vast openness was both frightening and exhilarating. "You are probably wondering why I bid on you," William said eventually, breaking the silence. Clara had been wondering exactly that, among many other things, so she made a small sound of agreement. William was quiet for another moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "My wife died 2 years ago. Cholera. We had been married for 3 years and ran the ranch together. Since she passed, I have been trying to manage everything alone, but it is too much for one person. I have hired hands who come during branding and roundup season, but I need someone permanent to help with the household tasks, the garden, the chickens, all the things that keep a homestead running. I went to town today intending to hire someone, and when I saw you on that platform, I saw someone who needed help as much as I did." It was the most straightforward explanation Clara could have hoped for, but something in his tone suggested there was more to it. "You could have hired anyone," she said carefully. "You did not have to buy someone from an auction." "No, I did not," William agreed. "But when I saw how they were treating you, how your own family could just sell you off like you were nothing, it made me angry. Nobody deserves that. And I thought maybe we could help each other. You need a place to go and I need help. It seemed like it might work out for both of us." He paused, then added, "I will pay you wages too once the ranch starts turning a profit again. I want this to be fair." Clara felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying since her mother's death and perhaps even longer. This man, this stranger, was offering her not just survival but dignity. "Thank you," she whispered, and meant it with her whole heart. William just nodded, guiding the horse around a rocky outcropping as they continued their journey. The ranch, when they finally reached it, was larger than Clara had expected. A sturdy house built of logs stood at the center, with a barn, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and several other outbuildings spread around it. A creek ran nearby, providing precious water, and Clara could see fenced pastures where cattle grazed in the distance. It was clear that William had built something substantial here, though it was also clear that the place needed more care than one person could provide. The garden was struggling, weeds overtaking the vegetables, and the chicken coop looked like it needed repairs. William helped Clara down from the horse, then led the mare to the barn to unsaddle and brush her down. Clara followed, unsure what else to do, and watched as he worked with efficient, practiced movements. "The house has 3 bedrooms," he said as he worked. "The largest was mine and my wife's. I still use that one. There is a smaller room that was going to be for children, and then a tiny room we used for storage. You can have whichever of those 2 you prefer. The storage room is small, but it has a window with a nice view. The other room is bigger but darker." "The small room sounds fine," Clara said. She was used to small spaces, to making herself as unobtrusive as possible. William finished with the horse and led Clara to the house. The interior was clean but sparse, with handmade furniture that showed skill in its construction. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and a wooden table with 4 chairs sat near the kitchen area. Everything was orderly, but there was an emptiness to it, as if the life had gone out of the place when William's wife died. He showed her to the small bedroom, which was indeed tiny but had a window overlooking the creek and the mountains beyond. A narrow bed with a simple frame sat against one wall, and there was a small chest for clothing and a hook on the wall for hanging things. "I will bring you some blankets and pillows," William said. "Are you hungry? I can make something." Clara realized she was starving. She had not eaten since the previous evening, too nervous about the auction to keep anything down that morning. "Yes, please," she said. William nodded and left her to settle in. Clara sat on the bed, testing it carefully, half expecting it to collapse under her weight, but the frame was solid and held without protest. She looked around the small room that was now hers, and felt the first stirring of something that might have been hope. In the kitchen, William prepared a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and cornbread. The food was plain but substantial, and Clara ate gratefully, trying not to shovel it down too quickly despite her hunger. William ate across from her, and in the lamplight she could study him more closely. He had laugh lines around his eyes despite the general seriousness of his expression, and she wondered what he had been like before grief had marked him. His hands were scarred and calloused, evidence of hard work, but they moved with a careful precision as he ate. "Tomorrow I will show you around properly," William said. "The chickens need tending morning and evening. The garden desperately needs weeding. I have been trying to keep up with it, but there are not enough hours in the day with everything else that needs doing. I handle the cattle and the heavy work, but anything you can do around the homestead would be a great help." "I can do that," Clara assured him. "My mother kept a garden. She taught me about plants." The memory of working alongside her mother in their small garden plot brought a wave of sadness, but also comfort. Her mother had been a patient teacher, showing Clara how to coax life from the stubborn Wyoming soil. William's expression softened. "You lost her recently." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "I am sorry. Losing someone you love is the hardest thing in the world." There was such understanding in his voice that Clara knew he truly meant it. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then William showed her where things were kept: the well for water, the privy out back, the supplies in the pantry. That first night Clara lay in the narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the wind whispering through the eaves, the creek babbling its endless song. She thought about how drastically her life had changed in a single day, from the humiliation of the auction block to this quiet room with its view of mountains and stars. William Everett was still a stranger, and she did not yet know what to make of him, but he had shown her more kindness in a few hours than her stepfather had in 3 months. For now, that was enough. She woke before dawn, a habit formed from years of rising early to help her mother with chores. The house was quiet, and for a moment Clara could not remember where she was. Then memory flooded back and she rose, splashing water from a basin on her face and smoothing down her dress as best she could. When she emerged from her room, she found William already up, stoking the fire in the stove to make coffee. "Morning," he greeted her. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," Clara answered. In truth, she had slept better than she had in months, the exhaustion of recent weeks finally catching up with her. William poured her a cup of coffee, strong and bitter, and Clara wrapped her hands around the warm mug gratefully. The mornings were still cool, even in July, at this elevation. "I will show you the chickens first," William said. "They are probably wondering why their breakfast is late." He led her outside into the gray pre-dawn light. The chicken coop was a sturdy structure that needed some repairs to the roof, but was otherwise sound. Inside, a dozen hens and one rooster regarded them with beady eyes, clucking impatiently. William showed Clara where the feed was kept and how much to give them, where to collect eggs, how to check for problems. It was simple work, the kind Clara could handle easily, and she felt a small surge of satisfaction at having a task she could complete. Over the following days, Clara settled into a routine. She tended the chickens, weeded the garden, hauled water, swept the house, and prepared meals. William worked with the cattle, repaired fences, took care of the heavier labor. They moved around each other carefully at first, two wounded people learning to share space, but gradually a rhythm developed. William was quiet by nature but not unkind. He thanked Clara for her work, complimented her cooking when she managed to create something more interesting than beans and salt pork, and helped her with tasks that required more strength than she possessed. Clara found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking. The way he gentled a spooked horse with soft words and patient hands. The way he always checked to make sure she had enough to eat before taking his own portion. The way he looked at the mountains in the evening light with an expression of deep contentment, as if the land itself sustained him. She did not know what to make of these observations, or why she found herself wanting to learn more about this quiet cowboy who had bought her freedom. 2 weeks after her arrival, Clara was working in the garden when she heard a rider approaching. She straightened, wiping dirt from her hands, and saw a wagon pulling up to the house. A woman in her 40s climbed down, wearing a practical dress and a friendly smile. "Hello," the woman called. "You must be Clara. William mentioned you when he was in town last week. I am Margaret Wilson. My husband and I have the ranch to the east." Clara felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of her size and her dirty dress and her uncombed hair, but Margaret's smile did not waver as she approached. "I brought you some things," Margaret said, gesturing to a basket in her wagon. "Some fabric for dresses, some of my preserves, a few other odds and ends. I remember how hard it was when I first came out here as a bride. Figured you could use some women's company and supplies." "That is very kind of you," Clara said, touched by the gesture. Margaret waved off her thanks. "William is a good man," Margaret said as they walked to the wagon to retrieve the basket. "One of the best. What happened to Emily, his first wife, was a tragedy. The whole community felt it. He has been alone too long, working himself to the bone trying to keep this place running. I am glad he has help now." She gave Clara a knowing look. "And I am glad you have a place to land. I heard about the auction. Terrible business, families selling their own like that, but maybe some good will come of it." Clara did not know what to say to that, so she just accepted the basket with murmured thanks. Margaret stayed for an hour, chatting about the area, the neighbors, the challenges of ranching in Wyoming territory. It was the most conversation Clara had experienced in weeks, and she found herself relaxing, even laughing at some of Margaret's stories about the early days of her own marriage. When Margaret finally left, promising to visit again soon, Clara felt less alone than she had since her mother's death. That evening, as Clara prepared dinner, William came in from his work and noticed the basket. "Margaret came by," he asked. Clara nodded, showing him the contents. William smiled, the first genuine smile Clara had seen from him. "She is a good woman. Her husband Tom is one of my closest friends. They helped me a lot after Emily died." It was the first time William had spoken his late wife's name in Clara's presence, and Clara sensed an opening. "What was she like?" she asked softly. William was quiet for a long moment, staring at something Clara could not see. "Strong," he finally said. "Smart. Funny. She grew up in Philadelphia, came west with her family when she was 16. We met at a dance in South Pass City. I was 23 and convinced I would be a bachelor forever because I was too awkward to talk to women. But Emily made it easy. She just walked up and asked me to dance, and that was that." "You must miss her terribly," Clara said. William nodded, his jaw tight. "Every day. But the missing gets a little easier as time passes. At first I thought I would go crazy from the silence, from the emptiness of this house without her. But you learn to carry the grief and keep living. You have to, or you might as well lie down and die yourself." Clara understood that. She had felt the same way after her mother's death, the crushing weight of loss that made every breath feel like a struggle. "My mother used to say that the people we love never truly leave us," Clara offered. "They live on in the things they taught us, the memories we carry." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman," William said. Clara smiled sadly. "She was. She was also the only person who ever made me feel like I was good enough just as I am. When she died, it felt like the world lost all its color." William looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara saw understanding in his eyes. "You are good enough, Clara. More than good enough. Do not let anyone tell you different." The words were simple, but they hit Clara like a physical blow, bringing tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. William noticed but did not comment, just moved to help her finish preparing the meal. As summer deepened into August, Clara noticed changes both in the ranch and in herself. The garden flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables that made their meals more varied and enjoyable. The chickens produced eggs reliably, and Clara had even managed to repair the damage to the coop roof with some guidance from William. She was learning the rhythms of ranch life, the way the seasons dictated the work, the way weather and water and grass determined everything. She was also learning about William. She learned that he sang quietly to himself when he thought no one could hear, old folk songs and hymns in a pleasant baritone. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, making wry observations about the cattle or the weather that made Clara laugh. She learned that he read in the evenings when work was done, books about history and exploration that he borrowed from Tom Wilson's surprisingly extensive library. She learned that he was unfailingly patient, never raising his voice even when things went wrong, approaching every problem with calm determination. What surprised Clara most was that William seemed to be learning about her too, paying attention in ways no one except her mother ever had. He noticed that she preferred working in the garden in the early morning when it was cool. He noticed that she hummed while she worked, old melodies her mother had taught her. He noticed that she was afraid of the cattle, so he taught her about them carefully, showing her that the cows were mostly gentle creatures despite their size. He noticed when she struggled with heavy tasks and helped without making her feel weak. One evening in late August, William returned from town with a package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," he said, handing it to Clara with an expression that might have been nervousness. Clara unwrapped it carefully to find fabric, a beautiful blue cotton printed with small white flowers. "Margaret mentioned you only have one dress," William explained. "I thought you might like material for another. There is thread and buttons too." Clara stared at the fabric, overwhelmed. It had been years since she had owned anything new, years since anyone had thought to give her something simply because they believed she might like it. "William, this is too much," she whispered. He shook his head firmly. "It is not enough. You work hard, Clara. You deserve something nice." That night Clara sat by lamplight and began cutting out a new dress, using her old one as a pattern. Her mother had taught her to sew, and though Clara was not an expert, she was competent enough. As she worked, she found herself thinking about William, about the quiet kindness he showed her every day, about the way her heart had started to beat a little faster when he smiled at her. She tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself not to be foolish. William had bought her at an auction. He saw her as a housekeeper, nothing more, but her traitorous heart did not seem to understand that distinction. September brought cooler weather and the start of roundup season. Tom Wilson and his 2 sons came to help, along with several other men from neighboring ranches. It was tradition in this part of Wyoming to help each other with the big jobs, and William had helped all of them in turn throughout the year. Clara suddenly found herself cooking for a dozen men, a daunting task, but she rose to the challenge. She baked bread until her arms ached, made huge pots of stew and beans, fried dozens of eggs and slabs of bacon. The men were appreciative, complimenting her cooking and thanking her profusely. Margaret came to help, bringing her own supplies and a cheerful attitude that made the work easier. "You are doing a wonderful job," Margaret told Clara as they rolled out biscuits together. "William looks happier than I have seen him in 2 years. You have been good for him." "I am just the help," Clara said, trying to keep her voice neutral. Margaret gave her a long look. "Is that what you think? Clara, that man looks at you like you hung the moon. I have known William Everett for 5 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, except Emily." Clara's hands stilled in the dough. "That cannot be true. Why would he look at me that way?" "I am not pretty or accomplished. I am just a woman he bought at an auction because he felt sorry for me." Margaret made an exasperated sound. "For a smart woman, you can be remarkably dense. William did not buy you out of pity. He bought you because from the moment he saw you on that platform, he recognized something in you, something that called to him. And these past months working alongside you have only strengthened that connection. The question is, how do you feel about him?" How did Clara feel about William? She had been trying not to examine that question too closely, afraid of what she might discover. But Margaret's direct inquiry demanded an honest answer, at least to herself. "I think I am falling in love with him," Clara admitted in a whisper. "But that is foolish, is it not? He loved his wife. I am just a replacement, someone to do the work Emily used to do." "You are not a replacement," Margaret said firmly. "You are your own person, Clara, with your own worth. And William knows that even if you do not. My advice, tell him how you feel. Life is too short and too uncertain out here to waste time on fear." Before Clara could respond, they were interrupted by one of Tom's sons asking for more coffee, and the moment passed. But Margaret's words echoed in Clara's mind. That night, after the other men had bedded down in the barn and the house was quiet, Clara could not sleep. She rose and went to the main room, thinking to heat some milk to settle her nerves. She found William there, sitting at the table with a lamp burning low, staring at nothing. He looked up when she entered, startled. "Clara, is everything all right?" "I could not sleep," she said. "I was going to make some warm milk. Would you like some?" William nodded and Clara busied herself with the task, grateful for something to do with her hands. When she set a cup before him and sat down with her own, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. "Thank you for all your help during Roundup," William said finally. "I know cooking for that many men is exhausting work. You have done a remarkable job." "I am glad I could help," Clara said. She took a breath, gathering her courage. "William, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really buy me at that auction?" The question hung in the air between them. William looked down at his cup, and for a long moment Clara thought he would not answer. "I told you the truth," he said slowly. "I needed help with the ranch, but that was not the only reason." "What was the other reason?" Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure William must be able to hear it. He looked up then, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Because when I saw you standing on that platform, enduring those stares and comments with your head held high despite your fear and humiliation, I saw courage. I saw dignity. I saw a woman who had been knocked down by life but refused to stay down. And I thought, here is someone who understands loss and keeps going anyway. Here is someone I could talk to, someone who might understand the things I cannot say to anyone else." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You saw all that in a few moments." "I saw enough," William said. "And these months since have proven I was right. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Clara. You work hard. You never complain. You find joy in small things like a good crop of beans or a sunset over the mountains. You have brought life back to this house, life I thought was gone forever when Emily died." "I am not Emily," Clara said, needing him to understand that. "I cannot be her." "I do not want you to be Emily," William said, his voice rough with emotion. "I loved my wife, and I will always carry her in my heart. But she is gone, and no matter how much I wish otherwise, she is not coming back. These past months, I have found myself thinking about the future again instead of just enduring the present. I have found myself looking forward to meals because it means sitting across from you and hearing about your day. I have found myself making excuses to come back to the house early just to see your smile." He reached across the table and took Clara's hand, his rough fingers gentle against hers. "I have found myself falling in love with you, Clara Reynolds, and that terrifies me because I do not know if you could ever feel the same way about me." Clara could barely breathe. Was this really happening? Was this strong, kind, wonderful man truly saying he loved her? "Why would that terrify you?" she whispered. "I am the one who should be terrified. You are a good man, William Everett, respected in the community, someone with property and prospects. I am a woman who was sold at an auction, whose own stepfather thought so little of her that he traded her for $50. I am too big, too plain, too ordinary. Why would you want me?" William's grip on her hand tightened. "Do you truly not see it? Clara, you are beautiful. Not in the way society says women should look, but in the ways that matter. You are beautiful when you are tending your garden, so focused on nurturing life. You are beautiful when you laugh at something silly the rooster did. You are beautiful when you talk about your mother, your love for her shining through your grief. You are beautiful in your kindness, your strength, your refusal to let hardship make you bitter. I want you because you are you, exactly as you are." The tears Clara had been holding back spilled over then, running down her cheeks unchecked. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "I tried not to. I told myself you only saw me as an employee, that I should not hope for anything more, but I could not help it. You are the first person besides my mother who ever made me feel valued, who ever looked past my size to see who I really am. I love your quiet strength, your patience, the way you care for the animals and the land. I love listening to you sing when you think no one is paying attention. I love the way you explain things to me without making me feel stupid for not knowing. I just love you, William." William stood and pulled Clara to her feet, drawing her into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face against his chest as he held her close. He was warm and solid and real, and Clara felt safer than she had in years. "I want to marry you properly," William said into her hair. "Not because I bought you, but because I love you and want to spend my life with you. I want to go into town and do this right, with a preacher and witnesses, and you in a white dress if you want one. I want everyone to know that you are my choice, my partner, my beloved wife. Will you marry me, Clara?" Clara pulled back enough to look up at him, seeing her own joy and wonder reflected in his face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." William's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his whole face, and then he was kissing her, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence as Clara kissed him back. It was Clara's first kiss, and she thought nothing in her life had ever felt so right. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in South Pass City. Margaret helped Clara make a dress from white muslin, simple but pretty, with lace borrowed from another neighbor at the collar and cuffs. William wore his best suit, brushed and pressed until it looked nearly new. Tom Wilson stood up as best man, and Margaret served as Clara's attendant. The church was full of neighbors and friends, people who had known William for years and wanted to witness his happiness. As Clara walked down the aisle on Tom's arm, since she had no family to perform the duty, she saw William waiting for her at the altar and thought her heart might burst from the fullness of it. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about being partners through whatever life might bring. William and Clara exchanged simple gold bands, purchased with money William had saved for months. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and William kissed her, Clara heard cheers and applause from the congregation. Afterward, there was a celebration at the church hall with food and music and dancing. Clara had never danced before, but William guided her through the steps, unconcerned when she stumbled or stepped on his feet. "I am not very good at this," Clara said breathlessly. William just smiled. "You are perfect." They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. William helped Clara down from the wagon and then swept her into his arms, carrying her over the threshold of the house that was now truly their home. Clara laughed in surprise and delight, wrapping her arms around his neck. William set her down gently in the main room and took both her hands in his. "I want you to know," he said seriously, "that we can take this as slowly as you need. I know we have only been courting for a few weeks, even though we have lived under the same roof for months. I will not rush you into anything you are not ready for." Clara's heart swelled with love for this considerate man. "I am ready," she said softly. "I want to be your wife in every way, William." She saw desire darken his eyes, but also tenderness and a hint of nervousness that matched her own. They came together slowly, learning each other, and that night, Clara discovered a physical intimacy that matched the emotional connection they had built over months of working side by side. The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. Fall turned to winter, and she and William weathered the brutal Wyoming cold together, keeping each other warm and entertained through the long dark evenings. William taught Clara to read better, for though she knew her letters, she had never had much opportunity for education. They read books aloud to each other, discussing stories and ideas. Clara taught William how to make his mother's recipes, skills passed down through generations. They talked about everything and nothing, building a foundation of friendship to support their growing love. When spring came and the snow finally melted, revealing the land reborn, Clara realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She kept the news to herself for a few weeks, wanting to be certain, But when a third month passed and she began feeling queasy in the mornings, she knew. She was carrying William's child. The realization brought a complicated mix of emotions. Joy, certainly, and excitement about becoming a mother. But also fear, for childbirth was dangerous in the best of circumstances, and Clara worried that her size might cause complications. She told William one evening after supper, simply and directly, "I am going to have a baby." William had been reading and he looked up sharply, the book sliding from his lap unnoticed. "Are you certain?" Clara nodded. William crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "That is wonderful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Clara, that is the best news I could imagine." "You are not worried?" Clara asked. "Childbirth is risky and I am not exactly small. What if something goes wrong?" William pulled back to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks gently. "Margaret delivered 3 healthy babies and she is nearly as tall as I am. Size has nothing to do with it." "Yes, there are risks, but we will get through them together. And we have good neighbors who will help. Margaret has helped at dozens of births. She will know what to do." His confidence bolstered Clara's own courage. They told Margaret and Tom the news the following Sunday at church, and Margaret immediately took charge, giving Clara advice about what to expect, what to eat, how to prepare. The entire community seemed to celebrate the news, bringing gifts of baby clothes and blankets they had made themselves. Clara was overwhelmed by the generosity of these near strangers who had welcomed her into their midst. As her belly swelled through the summer, William became increasingly protective. He insisted she rest more, took over the heavier chores without being asked, and worried constantly about her well-being. Clara found his concern endearing even when it verged on excessive. "I am pregnant, not dying," she teased when he insisted she sit down after she had been weeding the garden for less than an hour. William just looked at her with such naked love and fear that Clara's teasing died on her lips. She understood then that this was about more than just her pregnancy. William had already lost 1 wife. The thought of losing Clara too terrified him beyond reason. "I am not going anywhere," she promised, taking his face in her hands. "I am healthy and strong, and this baby is healthy and strong. I will be here with you for many, many years, growing old and gray and watching our children have children of their own." "I am going to hold you to that," William said, trying to smile but not quite managing it. Clara kissed him and felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. They would face this together, whatever came. Clara's labor began on a cold November evening, earlier than expected but not dangerously so according to Margaret, who had been staying at the ranch for the past week in anticipation. William paced outside the bedroom door, nearly wearing a path in the floorboards, while Margaret and another neighbor woman attended to Clara. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Clara focused on breathing, on the encouragement from the women helping her, on the knowledge that at the end of this ordeal she would hold her child. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, a baby's cry filled the house. "It is a boy," Margaret called. "A healthy baby boy." William burst into the room, propriety forgotten, and went straight to Clara's side. She was exhausted, her hair plastered to her head with sweat, but she had never looked more beautiful to him. Margaret placed the baby in Clara's arms, a red-faced, squalling bundle, and Clara felt a wave of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. "We have a son," she said to William, who was staring at the baby with an expression of wonder. "Would you like to hold him?" William took the baby with shaking hands, cradling him carefully against his chest. The baby quieted at the sound of his father's heartbeat, and William looked at Clara with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Clara. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas William, after Tom Wilson, who had been such a good friend, and William's late father. Tommy, as they called him, was a healthy baby with a good appetite and powerful lungs. Clara threw herself into motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything else, learning as she went, making mistakes and correcting them, loving her son with a fierceness that sometimes surprised her. William was an attentive father, taking Tommy with him on ranch rounds as soon as the baby was old enough, talking to him constantly about the land and the animals and the legacy they were building together. 2 years later, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Margaret, after Clara's mother and their dear friend. Rose was a quieter baby than Tommy had been, with her mother's thoughtful nature and her father's blue eyes. William doted on his daughter, and Clara often found them together, William reading to Rose or teaching her to identify wildflowers even before she could talk. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered under William and Clara's joint management. They added more cattle, improved their breeding stock, and became known throughout the territory for their quality livestock. Clara's garden became famous among the neighbors, producing more vegetables than they could possibly use. So Clara learned to preserve them and even trade the surplus for other goods they needed. She also became known for her kindness, always ready to help a neighbor in need, whether that meant tending a sick child or bringing food to a family facing hardship. Tommy grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and the animals, often shadowing his father and asking endless questions about everything. Rose was more artistic, spending hours drawing the mountains and wildlife around them, showing a talent that delighted her parents. When Rose was 5 and Tommy 7, Clara gave birth to twins, 2 more boys they named Henry and James. The house that had once seemed too quiet with just William echoed constantly now with children's voices, laughter, arguments, and the general chaos of a growing family. Through it all, William and Clara's love deepened and matured. They learned each other's moods and habits so well that whole conversations could pass with just a look. They weathered difficult times together, including a harsh winter that killed 1/3 of their cattle and a summer drought that nearly destroyed the garden. They celebrated good times too, like the year Tommy won a prize at the territorial fair for a calf he had raised himself, or when Rose's drawing was selected for display in a South Pass City shop. On their 10th wedding anniversary, William surprised Clara with a trip back to that same church where they had married, leaving the children in Margaret and Tom's capable care for a few days. They renewed their vows before the same preacher, though they were alone this time except for Tom and Margaret as witnesses. Afterward, they walked through South Pass City, and William deliberately took Clara past the spot where the auction had been held a decade earlier. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. Clara nodded slowly. "Sometimes. It was the worst day of my life, or so I thought at the time, but it brought me to you and I cannot regret that." "I used to come to town once a month for supplies," William said. "I almost did not come that particular day. I was tired and thought I could make do with what I had for another week, but something made me come anyway, some instinct I could not explain. Now I know it was fate or providence or whatever you want to call it. I was meant to be there that day. I was meant to see you and recognize you for what you were." "What was I?" Clara asked curiously. William pulled her close, not caring who might see them. "My second chance at happiness, my partner, my beloved wife, the mother of my children, my whole world." Clara felt the familiar sting of tears, though these were happy tears. "You gave me so much more than I ever dreamed possible, William. You gave me safety and respect when I thought I would never know either again. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You taught me that my worth is not determined by what I look like or what others think of me, but by who I am inside. You always had worth, William corrected gently. I just made sure you knew it. Everything you have, Clara, everything we have built together, you earned through your own strength and determination. I may have bought you that day, but you won me with your courage and kindness. I am the lucky one. They returned to the ranch renewed in their commitment to each other and their life together. As the children grew, William and Clara taught them the values that had guided their own lives. Work hard, treat others with respect, find joy in simple things, and never judge people by their appearance. Tommy eventually took over much of the ranch operation, proving himself as capable as his father. Rose married a teacher from South Pass City, a kind young man who appreciated her artistic nature, and they built a house on a portion of William and Clara's land so they could stay close. The twins, always adventurous, talked of going to California, but they were still young, and William and Clara suspected they would eventually come back to Wyoming where they belonged. On a summer evening 25 years after that fateful auction, William and Clara sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Grandchildren played in the yard, Tommy's children and Rose's oldest. William's hair was more gray than brown now, and Clara's face showed the lines of a life well lived, but they still held hands like young lovers as they sat together. You ever regret it? William asked suddenly. Marrying me, building this life? Clara looked at him in surprise. Never. Not for a single moment. Why would you even ask? William was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I think about that young woman on the auction block, so frightened but so brave. I think about all the other paths your life might have taken if I had not been there that day. Maybe you would have found something better, somewhere else. Clara squeezed his hand firmly. There is nothing better than this, William. Nothing better than the life we built together, the family we created, the love we share. That young woman on the auction block could not have imagined this happiness, even in her wildest dreams. You saw my worth when no one else did, not even me. You gave me a chance to become the person I was meant to be. How could I ever regret that? William raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I love you, Clara Everett. I loved you that first day even though I did not know it yet. I loved you when we spoke our vows. I loved you when you gave me our children. I love you now more than ever. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Clara said, leaning her head on his shoulder and watching their grandchildren play. Always and forever. As the sun dipped below the mountains and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, William and Clara remained on the porch, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The Obese girl who had been sold as a last resort had become a beloved wife, a devoted mother, a respected member of her community, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth. And the cowboy who had seen past society's prejudices to the person beneath had gained far more than a housekeeper or ranch hand. He had found his soulmate, his partner, his greatest love. Years continued to pass at the ranch that William and Clara had transformed from a struggling operation into one of the most successful in that part of Wyoming territory. When Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, the Everett family celebrated along with their neighbors, proud to be part of this new state's history. Their children and grandchildren would carry on their legacy, testament to the love that had started on a dusty auction block in South Pass City so many years before. Tommy married a woman from a neighboring ranch, and they had 4 children who added to the joyful chaos of family gatherings. Rose and her husband had 3 children, and even the twins eventually settled down. Henry marrying a girl from town, and James finding love with a widow who already had 2 children of her own. The Everett family grew and flourished, spreading across the territory, but always maintaining their connection to the original ranch where it had all begun. William and Clara aged gracefully together, their love a constant in a world that was rapidly changing. When William's joints started to ache from decades of ranch work, Clara made herbal remedies that eased his pain. When Clara's eyesight began to fail, William read to her every evening just as they had done in the early days of their marriage. They supported each other through the losses that come with age, the deaths of friends like Margaret and Tom, the aches and pains of growing old. On their 30th anniversary, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. Children and grandchildren came from all over Wyoming, and the house and yard overflowed with love and laughter. Tommy made a speech, thanking his parents for showing him what real love looked like, for teaching him that a successful life was measured not in money or property, but in relationships and integrity. Rose presented them with a painting she had worked on for months, a detailed image of the ranch house with the mountains in the background, capturing the beauty of the land they loved. The grandchildren sang songs and performed skits, and there was dancing and feasting and storytelling. As Clara watched her family, spanning 3 generations now, she marveled at how far she had come from that terrified young woman on the auction block. She had found her worth not because William had declared it, but because she had proven it to herself through years of hard work, love, and dedication. She had learned that beauty comes in many forms, that strength is not just physical, and that the most important thing any person can do is love and be loved in return. Late that night, after everyone had finally settled down to sleep, scattered throughout the house and in tents set up in the yard, William and Clara slipped out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. The night was clear, the stars brilliant in the darkness, and a cool breeze brought the scent of pine and sage. William wrapped a blanket around Clara's shoulders and pulled her close. 30 years, he said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you at that auction. Other times it feels like we have always been together. I know what you mean, Clara said. I can barely remember what my life was like before you, before all of this. It is as if that other Clara was a different person entirely. She was brave, William said, just like you are now. That has never changed. Clara smiled in the darkness. We have had a good life, have we not? Better than either of us could have hoped for. The best life, William agreed. I would not change a single thing. Well, maybe I would have worked up the courage to tell you I loved you a little sooner, saved us both some worry. Clara laughed quietly, remembering those uncertain weeks when they had both been afraid to speak their feelings. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to happen. We needed that time to build our foundation, to really know each other before we admitted what we felt. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the cottonwood trees William had planted when Tommy was born. Promise me something, William said eventually. Clara turned to look at him, though she could barely see his face in the darkness. Anything. When I am gone, do not mourn too long. Live whatever years you have left fully, surrounded by our children and grandchildren. Be happy, Clara. That is all I have ever wanted for you. William Everett, do not talk like that, Clara scolded, though her voice was thick with emotion. You are going to outlive me by years. Everyone always said cowboys were too tough to kill. William chuckled. Maybe so. But just in case, I wanted you to know. You gave me 15 years with Emily, and that was a gift. But you gave me 30 years and counting of joy I never expected to find again. You healed my broken heart and gave me a reason to embrace life instead of just enduring it. Whatever time we have left, whether it is days or decades, know that I am grateful for every moment." Clara took his face in her hands, feeling the familiar contours, the beard that was now more white than brown, the lines that mapped out years of laughter and worry. "I am grateful, too. For everything. For your kindness that first day, for your patience as I learned to accept your love, for your partnership in building this life. You are my heart, William Everett. You always will be." They kissed then, a gentle kiss of long married love, and returned to their bed where they had shared so many nights, holding each other close and grateful for one more day together. As it turned out, they would have many more days together. William and Clara both lived into their 70s, a remarkable age for that time and place. They saw their youngest grandchildren grow up and begin families of their own. They celebrated holidays and birthdays, helped their children weather storms both literal and metaphorical, and remained the anchor of their large, sprawling family. Their love story became legend in South Pass City and the surrounding ranches, told to young couples as an example of what real love looked like. When William finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep with Clara beside him, worn out by a long, well-lived life. Clara mourned him deeply, but did not let grief destroy her, remembering her promise to embrace whatever time she had left. She moved in with Tommy and his family, spending her final years spoiling great-grandchildren and sharing stories of the old days. She told them about their grandfather, about his strength and kindness and unwavering integrity. She told them about the auction, not hiding that difficult beginning, but framing it as the start of something beautiful rather than something shameful. "Your grandfather saw me when no one else did," she would say. "He taught me that my value did not depend on what others thought of me, but on who I chose to be. He showed me that love is not about perfect appearances, but about perfect understanding. And he gave me all of you, this beautiful family that is his greatest legacy." Clara lived 2 years after William's death, long enough to see another great-grandchild born, a girl who reminded everyone of Rose with her artistic temperament. On a spring morning with wildflowers blooming across the meadows and the mountains sharp against a brilliant blue sky, Clara passed quietly, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had gathered when it became clear her time was short. They buried her next to William on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Clara Everett, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, 1852–1926. At her funeral, which drew people from all over the state, Tommy spoke of his mother's courage, Rose of her creativity and kindness, the twins of her humor and wisdom. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren shared memories, and neighbors told stories of Clara's generosity and strength. It was a celebration of a life well lived, a woman who had overcome tremendous adversity to build something beautiful. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from Tommy's oldest son, Clara's first grandchild, who read from a letter William had written to Clara on their 25th anniversary, found among her possessions after her death. "My dearest Clara," the letter read, "25 years ago today, I made the best decision of my life when I stood before God and our community and pledged myself to you. You have given me more happiness than any man deserves. You have shown me that love is not something that happens to us, but something we build together, day by day, choice by choice, through good times and bad. You are my partner in all things, my confidante, my greatest supporter and my deepest love. When I bought you at that auction so many years ago, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. You brought color back to a world that had gone gray. You gave me hope when I thought hope was lost. You showed me that it was possible to love again, differently than before, but just as deeply. Whatever time we have left together, whether it is 1 year or 30 more, know that you are the greatest gift of my life. I love you, Clara, with everything I am. Yours always, William. There was not a dry eye among the mourners as those words were read, testament to a love that had transcended the difficult circumstances of its beginning to become something pure and lasting. William and Clara's story would be passed down through generations of Everetts, a reminder that true worth is inherent, not assigned, and that love can flourish in the most unlikely places when given by generous hearts. The ranch continued for generations after them, each new owner adding their own touches but maintaining the core of what William and Clara had built. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original cabin that William had built remained, preserved as a reminder of where it all started. Great-great-grandchildren played in the same creek where Clara had once drawn water, rode horses across the same pastures where William had tended his cattle, and looked at the same mountains that had witnessed the unfolding of such an extraordinary love story. And so the legacy of the obese girl who was sold as a last resort and the cowboy who saw her worth lived on, not just in the land and buildings, but in the values passed down through the family. Work hard. Be kind. See people for who they really are, not what they appear to be. Love deeply and without reservation. Build something that will last. These were the lessons William and Clara taught, not just through their words but through their lives, and these were the lessons that shaped generation after generation of Everetts. In South Pass City, the place where that long-ago auction had taken place became a park, the town having grown and modernized over the decades. Someone placed a historical marker there, noting that this had been the site where William Everett first met his wife Clara, though the full story was too complex and personal to fit on a bronze plaque. But those who knew the story understood its significance, this place where judgment had been rendered and then overturned by one man's ability to see true worth. The world changed dramatically between that auction in 1874 and Clara's death in 1926. Wyoming had gone from territory to state. The wild frontier had been tamed, fenced, and settled. Trains and then automobiles had replaced horses for most travel. Electricity had come to many towns, though the Everett Ranch still relied on lanterns and wood stoves at the time of Clara's death. The 20th century brought rapid transformation, but some things remained constant. Love, family, hard work, integrity, these values proved timeless, as relevant in the modern age as they had been in the Wild West. The Everett family continued to embody these values as they moved forward through the 20th century and beyond. Tommy's grandson would serve in World War II and return to run the ranch with the same dedication his great-grandfather had shown. Rose's great-great-granddaughter would become an artist of some renown, her work displayed in galleries across the country, always crediting her inspiration to the Wyoming landscape and the stories of her ancestor who had loved to draw. The twins' descendants spread across the country, but they always maintained their connection to the original ranch, returning for summer visits and family reunions. And always, at these gatherings, someone would tell the story of William and Clara, of how they found each other against all odds and built a love that lasted a lifetime. Young people would listen, sometimes skeptically, to this tale of unlikely romance, but they could not deny the evidence all around them. The thriving ranch, the close-knit family, the clear thread of love and dedication that ran through every generation. William and Clara had not just created a family, they had created a legacy of love that refused to die. Their story served as a reminder that every person has worth, regardless of what society might say. That dignity and respect are not given but inherent. That love sees past surfaces to the soul beneath. That the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings, and that a life measured in love and relationships is the richest life of all. As the sun set over the Wyoming mountains on the day of Clara's funeral, casting long shadows across the land she had loved, the assembled family stood together at the graveside. They sang hymns Clara had loved, old songs from her childhood that she had taught to her children and grandchildren. They shared memories and tears, grief and gratitude intermingled. And when it was done and they walked back down the hill toward the ranch house where a meal awaited them, they walked as William and Clara had taught them to walk, together, supporting each other, finding strength in family and community. The obese girl who had been sold as a last resort had become so much more than anyone at that auction could have imagined. She had been a beloved wife, a devoted mother, a cherished grandmother and great-grandmother, a respected community member, a woman who proved that worth comes from within. And the cowboy who saw past society's prejudices to recognize her value had been rewarded beyond measure, finding in Clara a partner who matched him in strength, dedication, and love. Their story, which began with shame and desperation on a dusty auction block in South Pass City, ended with honor and celebration, surrounded by generations of descendants who carried their legacy forward. It was a story of redemption and recognition, of love triumphing over adversity, of two people who found in each other exactly what they needed most. And it was a story that would never truly end, living on in every Everett who inherited William and Clara's values, in every person who heard their tale and resolved to see others more clearly, in every act of kindness inspired by their example. As stars began to appear in the darkening Wyoming sky, the same stars William and Clara had watched together on countless evenings, the family gathered in the house they had built and shared the meal that love had made possible. They told stories, laughed through tears, and held close to each other. And somewhere in that space between earth and heaven that holds all our most precious memories, two souls reunited, William and Clara together again at last, watching over the family they had created and the legacy they had left behind. It was not just a love story, though it was certainly that. It was a story of transformation, of courage, of seeing and being seen. It was a story of two broken people who healed each other. It was a story of a woman who learned her own worth and a man who helped her see it. It was a story of building something beautiful from unpromising materials, of creating light from darkness, of choosing love over fear. And it was a story that ended not with death but with continuation, the ultimate happy ending, where love proved stronger than time and legacy outlasted mortality. William and Clara's love had started in the most unlikely way, but it had grown into something magnificent, something worth remembering, something worth celebrating, something that would never truly end as long as anyone carried their memory forward. Their love story, which had seemed destined for tragedy that hot summer day in 1874, had instead become a triumph, a testament to the transformative power of love, respect, and recognition. The obese girl who was sold as a last resort had found her worth, not because someone gave it to her, but because someone helped her see that it had always been there. And the cowboy who made her, his beloved wife, had gained far more than he ever imagined possible, when he made that fateful bid of $50 that changed two lives forever.